Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back at it again to talk about Lightweaver maximization for both raids and for Mythic Plus. Biggest thing has been that there's been some substantial talent changes for raiding, with Lightweaver, of course, being very powerful. Unfortunately, Divine Word didn't really work out the way I was expecting it to work in the raids, and in general, your AoE healing is just very, very weak. You know, Circle of Healing, Prayer of Healing are doing maybe 100,000 healing per target, and we have like 6 or 7 mil health bars, so it's not really pushing up the health pools. Lightweaver, after it got buffed in beta, which was pretty much the only change that the spec was getting, or the major change the spec was getting in beta, has really made it so that your single target output is incredibly powerful in both keys and in raids, and what it's provided is that Holy can be the huge spot healer. And so we're going to talk about how to maximize that. With some of the talent updates, notably, like I said, not having a Divine Word or Lightwell build routes you through into Lightweaver through the Resonant Word talent. We'll talk a lot about how you maximize that in the gameplay section. There are a lot of possibilities with what you can maximize or you can choose with the tree. Notably, you are routing through to Afterlife, which is something you very rarely have done. You're routing to Afterlife because you basically don't want to take any of the Circle of Healing or Prayer of Healing abilities, because they're all just very weak, require a ton of points to invest into it. There's going to be some variety with different builds that have some possibilities. Notably, Salvation is very weak these days. It's still okay, but for a 12-minute cooldown that you might get a second cast of during an encounter, it's gotten a lot weaker, which has sort of paved the way for Apotheosis to get utilized. Since you're already leaning really heavily into being the spot healer in the raid, well, the mana efficiency side for Apotheosis helps a lot, so you can continue casting lots of flash heals to build up your stacks for Lightweaver to then spend on your heal casts. And it just is a solid cooldown to really utilize. The uptime of it has been pretty good in general as well, and it felt very noticeable in a world where Preservation of Okers are taking the lion's share of the AoE healing, that there's still a lot of single target healing to produce, and the best way to really do something about that is to smash tons of single target with Lightweaver. The primary nodes you're going to have is Divine Image, of course, and Lightweaver, but you could potentially drop Divine Image if you really needed to for a progression environment. You do lose 4 or 5% healing if you were going to drop out of Divine Image and then route in through Desperate Times to go into Restitution. And what you potentially could do is you could die, go into Angel form, rip a res with Afterlife, and then you would also res yourself with Restitution. So it's niche, but with some of these later encounters, even the end of Ovanax might be pretty decent for it, where you could take advantage of that sort of prog environment build where you're still learning the encounter, but you get a free res without impacting the raid team, and on it goes. There seems to be some potential there. Now, when it comes to gameplay in a Lightweaver setup, both for raids and for Mythic Plus, you predominantly want to be focusing on your Resonant Weaving. That is taking advantage of the Resonant Words buff, giving you a 40% buff to your next flash heal or heal. Those are the predominant abilities you're going to use it for. As a result, you predominantly want to be using it for heal, since it's also going to be buffed by your Lightweaver effect. And so from the very beginning, you want to make sure, when possible, when you're using your Holy Words, that you already have Lightweaver stacks up and available. So when you are looking to cast all your Holy Words and everything like that, usually starting the fight, I'll try to make sure I already have my Lightweaver stacks up and ready to go, and being able to spend those Resonant Word procs whenever possible on heal. That being said, there is some moments where, of course, you have extra surge procs, or you don't have any heal stacks or anything like that. Flash heal's fine. It's preferred to use it on heal when you can. Your gameplay really accelerates a lot when you're playing Archon, and that is really because you are getting flash heal procs so rapidly whenever you're making new halos. It's always giving you a surge proc, and surge procs under Archon are also giving you cooldown reduction for your Sanctify, which is really important in a second. So the big thing that you want to focus on when you're using Halo with this setup is that this is how you are generating new stacks of Lightweaver. So usually I'm trying to spend my Lightweaver stacks before I Halo if possible, because I know I'm going to get some surge procs, and I know I can only hold 2 stacks of Lightweaver. So you hit the Halo, you immediately start consuming those surge procs, because they always happen every time you make a new Halo, and then they can naturally happen just from the healing that Halo is doing on top of it, meaning you can really quickly get overstacked with surge procs very quickly if you're not careful. And keep in mind, they're free. the predominant mana burn that you experience when raiding as a Holy Priest is Flash Heal, and so the more you take advantage of them for free, the easier that it's going to be. And so I'm trying to make sure that I'm taking advantage of those free Flash Heals when possible, keeping my Holy Words on cooldown because your healing is buffed during your Halo effect. There's a Resonant Energy passive from Archon, so every ally that gets healed by your Halos are now taking more healing. And so I try to use this as an opportunity to get my Surge procs up so I can have more Lightweaver stacks, spending my Holy Words during this time to take advantage of the bonus healing that I have on hand, and you're ideally trying to time the ability for when there's consistent raid-wide damage. On Ovanax, for example, you're timing it when there's the feed going on, and then that buff sort of feeds, the Resonant Energy feeds into a hymn usage, or it feeds into Holy Word usage, or feeds into Apotheosis usage, all of those things together. Him has been kind of difficult to use thus far in raid progression. It's pretty good. It's been kind of difficult to use without some spatial paradoxes. Don't feel bad about using like Guardian Spirit on yourself to make sure you're getting these hymns off, because there's a lot of area denial in the incoming raid. There's a lot of movement in the raid. So definitely don't be afraid to take advantage of GS, especially if you're not able to take advantage of a spatial paradox or something, and you just need to be like consistent with it. When you're taking advantage of Apotheosis, you also need to remember that it's resetting all of your Holy Words. That includes Chastise. And so this is sort of how you interact with the gameplay as a whole, is that when you have Apotheosis and you have Surge procs, you need to be really mindful of using your Sanctifies a lot, because having a Surge proc will have the Flash Shield trigger, give you cooldown reduction for Serenity, and then it also triggers cooldown reduction for Sanctify. And so you can really quickly get all of your Holy Words back, which, if you don't have that much haste, it actually is kind of noticeable how much slower the gameplay goes. Not advocating to stack haste or anything like that, but it does add some more pressure for you to think about to make sure you don't waste resources, because you can very quickly get glutted with them. I think I'm around like 13 or 14% haste for raids, and that felt really good. And the bonus haste you even get from like Power Infusion didn't even feel too bad when I was, casting it on others based off their optimal timings. But there were some moments where I had like Bloodlust going or the Power Infusion, and I was like, oh, this actually is noticeable, it is helpful, and it's a great opportunity to just cast out extra heals, get additional cooldown reduction, the works. When you have Apotheosis up, though, the biggest priority is making sure that you are not overcapping on Holy Words. Your first priority is definitely on casting Flash Heals and heals to get you more Holy Words, but you also need to make sure that you're not overcapping. A lot of times when you had like Apotheosis procs in like Dragonflight gameplay, all you really focused on was trying to build up the Holy Words as fast as you possibly could, and then you spend it at the end of the Apotheosis window or after it's over. When you're actually using the Apotheosis ability, you have a lot of uptime, and so you're naturally going to be casting the free Holy Words during that uptime and also building up new ones. And so the biggest thing I would recommend is hard leaning into Resonant Weaving during this period. Casting, Chastise, followed up with a buffed up heal from Lightweaver. You're taking advantage of a Surge proc, followed up with a Holy Word, followed up with a buffed up heal cast, and trying to sort of commit to that gameplay as best as you possibly can. But there's absolutely going to be moments where you are going to burn through your Lightweaver stacks pretty quickly, and then you have to kind of use Surge procs as well. Also, if people are taking a ton of damage and they need healing now, you can overcap on your Resonant Word stacks just to like force it and make sure everyone's fine. This happened a couple times when I needed to just blast instant healing into people who had debuffs on Ovanax progression. It's not ideal, but if somebody needs healing, and that's your job at the end of the day, is to save them. So there's these moments where you're playing kind of like a tight rotation or a tight profile where you're keeping your Prayer of Mending on cooldown, keeping your Holy Words on cooldown, looking for areas where you can hit Chastise and follow it up with powerful heal cast to keep everybody topped. But then there's also moments where you might just need to like spam tons of output into a single target on that one. So keep that in mind as well. Gameplay for like downtime, usually I'm trying to make sure I'm getting some more smite casts off if I can sit there and stand still, because one of the biggest mana drains is actually having to hard cast flash heals. So keep in mind, even just spamming smite is going to give you a chance for your Surge of Light procs to come back and allow you to kind of like pool them up whenever you need to a little bit later on throughout the encounter. Overall, I think that Prayer of Mending feels like a little bit weaker, but getting the Apotheosis procs is still very noticeable, especially if you're tracking them properly. You could even like pool Surge procs if you know that you're going to cast Apotheosis soon, or if you know that you're going to get it procced soon out of Answered Prayers, and then you can use those surge procs with the Apotheosis effect to also give you some more Sanctifies to blast huge amounts of healing down the stretch. At the moment, I'm planning to run Apotheosis for most of the incoming encounters. Ovanax has just a crazy amount of spot healing, obviously with the players dropping off their debuffs and they're getting huge heal absorbs onto them. Sikrin was the exact same way with the Phase Blade mechanic. Going into Nexus Princess, everybody with the Queen's Bane debuff needs insane amounts of single target healing, so it's kind of these things that stack up on top of each other for every encounter where you need somebody to do the brunt of the single target healing. And that's really just where Holy Priest is shining. And so at the moment, I think I'm going to be playing Holy on most of my progression for my guild to sort of fill into that role. Disc feels all right, but the problem is Preservation's kind of doing the same exact thing, but better and a little bit more smoothly. So I think as it stands right now, I'll be mostly playing Holy on Prog, and then a little bit later on, I'll make sure I get my clears in as Disc later on. If you have any other questions, or if there's anything the guide hasn't covered, make sure you let me know in the description down below. For the updated talent builds, make sure you check my guides out on Wowhead, also in the description. Big thank you to our patrons for making all of this content possible. If you'd like to support and get access to new videos, check it out in the description as well. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll catch you all next time.